Hello, 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 everyone. It's so nice to see all of you here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so nice to see so many wonderful people here in the chat. The only regions I know is Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, and, well, Matamoros is in Tamaulipas, but yeah. I know what you mean. There's actually a really good book that I wish more people read. That takes place in Matamoros. It's really interesting. It's actually one of the first pieces, like earliest pieces of Chicanx literature. And it's called Caballero, a historical novel. Okay. I guess we best turn off the music, even though it's nice ambiance, of course. So, for today, what we are going to do is... Yes, we're going to go over the ICC stuff today, and of course I should probably I'll turn off the wiggler and show myself. Why not? Yeah. Welcome one, welcome all to the Shakspier stream. It's been a while. Stuff has happened. I have a similar corner to, but the wall is different. Like, it's just the lighting that kind of makes, because my old wall was like white, it was whitewashed, whereas this one is kind of has like a different tone to it. But yeah, I'm currently trying to showcase like all of my different religious art. Oh my goodness, Looney Tunes, thank you so very much for the tier 1 sub. 9 months, my goodness gracious. So wonderful to hear, so wonderful to hear. So I have different religious art. I like to collect religious art from all places. I mean, and also art in general. I think to me it's pretty cool. So I have like a Buddha. I have this wonderful wheel that is from Tibet, and like the Arch of Titus. Very specific places in Chiesa della Salute, Ponto di Rialto, and then Piazza San Marco. I have the fan with the famous painting of the waves. I have a Ganesha statuette here, and some handmade Virgen de Guadalupe. The only map, I tried to put up all of my maps and kind of like reconfigure it almost like how I had it before, but I realized that I didn't really need to do that, right? Like, new place, right? Kind of like there we go. New place, new me. I had to... Hello, Moanope. It's so nice to see you. It's so nice to see you. So now I am in Mexico. I did also want to... And I will announce this throughout the stream, right? That I am starting to give classes. I am going to be teaching a sort of historical theory and methods course, a Spanish course, and eventually like a critical theory course, right? And anybody can sign up, right? There is, it is for a fee, but that's just because like that would be my quote unquote, that would be my job besides streaming. right? Because I had to move to Mexico rather quickly, because I know there are a lot of issues in the United States that, kind of preempted my move here. So, but I'm happy to be back in Mexico. Now, for today, we are gonna be talking about life in Mexico. I did do a little mini presentation the other day about people that wanted to try to find refuge in Mexico. I'm going to go over a little bit of the stuff I went over because I don't think I can be as exhaustive. I plan on doing these also for eventually as well, like for people that are very interested. I mean, that that really do want to make that move, because again, there are a lot of people who need to find a safe haven, and if Mexico can be that safe haven, then I think, to me, it's worthwhile to help, right? I love, like my motto is always, I'm always here to help, right? So, without further ado, we're actually not going to start. We're actually not going to start talking about Mexico, but rather we're going to start talking about the International Criminal Court. Okay? So, first let me make this a bit more let me know how the volume is, okay?
Est ouverte.
So, one question I did get from Noah, who I don't believe is currently watching, right, is like, what is the ICC? What does the ICC do, right? So, the International Criminal Court was founded after, right, we had the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, right, after those two genocides. To deal with, right, the people that suffered at the hands, right, of the genocidaires, and they decided, instead of having an ad hoc court, right, which is what would happened. Hello, hola, hola, bad lefty, bienvenido. It essentially meant that, now we would have a permanent court, right, that would handle issues pertaining to international law, and that it would be, able to have investigatory powers. But most of all, right, I think it's important to note, is that, again, it would have a permanent seat and would be able to do its investigations and, bring people to trial, right? Regardless of whether there was an ad hoc court created, right? Because that was the issue, right? It's like they had to make one for the former Yugoslavia, they had to make one for Rwanda, etc., etc. So instead, they founded what was called the Rome Statute, right, which elucidates. And in fact, I actually have all of the documents, right, of the ICC. I mean, because international law, particularly vis-a-vis like genocide studies, right, is something that is very important to my work, right? So one of the things that I had to know, that I had to learn, right, and that I have to be very conversant in. And I'm not saying I'm I'm not definitely not the absolute expert, for sure, but still, it's stuff that I have written about, and stuff that I have spoken about. In fact, actually, let me see if I can find a quick explanatory video that kind of goes over the main mechanisms of the ICC. because there are quite a few things. The main thing is that you have the chief prosecutor, right? And so a lot of people have often bashed
the international
the ICC, right? And other scholars, right? Not just not just necessarily me, or other people, right? That are sort of, again, knowledgeable in the when it comes to international law, right? Have often called it, the ICC, the International Caucasian Court, right? That's a quote, right? I'm quoting this, right? I'm not saying it as though I am calling it that, right? I'm quoting, right, what it was called, because of the fact that almost everybody that has ever been brought to trial has come from one continent, right? And that is the continent of Africa. And so that is, and I'm just saying it because I know Twitch is, touchy now, right? And that is the main reason why, again, it has been called that, because most of the people that have been brought to trial, right? Milosevic being no, Milosevic was not, he wasn't at the ICC, he was at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Right? Or am I misremembering myself? Yeah. In fact, this week, this is actually Genocide Awareness Week, but I didn't want to put it as my title because, But again, as a genocide studies scholar, I do have to note that this week marks 30 years since the start of the Yugoslav wars. The ICC. And since the genocide at Srebrenica. They do seem to catch a lot more war criminals from Africa, yeah. Which court got Duterte? The ICC. The former courts were ad hoc courts, and they no longer have any... Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Yugoslav war started in 92, right? I meant to say Bosnia. Yeah, Bosnia, that's what I meant. Bosnia, right? And Srebrenica, right? Of it being, because that happened in April of 1995. So it's Genocide Awareness Week, and I do apologize if I'm getting stuff, a little bit. I just moved country, and I'm just still trying to, get on my feet. So I apologize if I misspeak. Please do feel more than welcome to correct me, though. I'm more than happy to be corrected with the good information. But it is Genocide Awareness Week, and I actually heard someone, a scholar who, oh yeah, I do remember the spicy title video, Bad Empanada. It would be interesting. I mean, I don't think he would ever agree to it, because I'm literally no one, but to talk about, right? Him as a historian, right? To talk about oh my goodness, Moa Nope, thank you so very much for your subscription. Thank you. 7 months. Wow. But it would be nice, it would be cool to talk to him, right? But I know right now he's doing other stuff, so I'll leave it at that. But to talk about now, what is the ICC, right? So again, as I said, it was founded in the aftermath of the farming views from the client. Look, you know what? I'm sorry, but like, no. You know what? I'm not gonna say anything. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no knowledge. I can neither confirm nor deny. I have said nothing on this subject. Anyway. So what is the ICC, right? What is the ICC? It was founded in the aftermath of particularly the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Yeah, no worries. And then the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, right? Now they exist as the residual mechanism for blah, blah, blah. And again, one of the things I had wanted to do in the past, right? No, no need to apologize, Powerful Finger. You're totally cool. Was that I wanted to go do research in Rwanda, right, about the genocide and other stuff, right? Unfortunately, the conditions don't seem conducive to that. So I'm trying to possibly, well, one, find a job, right? So, there's that. So, your subscriptions to this channel, right, on Twitch, and your donations to my Help Shakespeare Survive, Fund on Throne, they really do help, trust me. Like, and also, research wise, right, we have this book over here, right, that is 46% funded. I really need it for, like, it's like I lost, again, now being in Mexico, I lost the institutional access I had in America. So, like, if I need a book, it's a bit more difficult to get, because unless I get a job, which the school year already started, the spring semester already started, so I know I'm not going to get a job right now, right? So I have to wait. So if people want to help out, you can always do so, via my research via Throne, of course, and also by subscribing to this channel on Twitch, or by going to my Throne and giving to the fund to help me out. But regardless, was Milosevic in prison for Bosnia or Kosovo? I actually didn't know what he went to prison. It says here, right, from what I understand, that he was connected to both Bosnia and Kosovo, and also the Croatian War of Independence. Oh, no. It wasn't the international, so the International Criminal Tribunal, right, said, right, that he had done it, right? The precursor to the ICC said he did it. The ICJ, right, the one where South Africa, where it's countries, right, where South Africa has Israel right now, right, taking it to court. They are the ones that said that there was no evidence linking him to the genocide committed by the, Republika Srpska, right? So, but this is the issue, right? This is why the court is very strange sometimes. The International Court of Justice, right? They're both at The Hague, and they're down the street from one another. But again, one of them is between countries. The other one is separate, right? It did find that he violated the Genocide Convention. But it didn't hold him as the perpetrator, as the genocidaire, right? They held him as guilty because of the fact that he failed to stop a genocide, right? That was the difference. The ICC said he did it, right? That he was he committed the crimes, right? The ICJ said he didn't. He did violate the Genocide Convention by not making by not ensuring that the genocide was by allowing a genocide to happen, right? Essentially, if they didn't send soldiers there, they definitely sent weapons, and there were a lot of illegal. Oh yeah, I mean, look, this morning I was in a seminar that was being held at. Well, again, the ICC said he did it, right? The one that goes against individuals, right, says he did it. So, in terms of the one that actually holds people criminally liable, individuals, says he did it. The ICJ, the one that does countries, right, is the one that said, oh, he didn't do it, right? Instead, he blah, 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 right? So this is where the courts disagree, right? The two international courts, right? So, another thing too is there were a lot of other issues, right? But anyway, I was at a seminar that was being held, again, for Genocide Awareness Week, in Washington, D.C. Sorry. Gosh, I've been trying to take this thing off for a while, so I thought I would do it right now. But it got stuck on my watch. Oh well. So Arkan was a very popular Serbian militant who had his own... Oh, I see. You know what's interesting is that the same guy that founded the first real national bank, if you want, Powerful Finger, we can go over that story, because it actually is kind of interesting, because it also was, someone... I mean, I don't think he was a murderer, but he founded the first real national bank. And then he was convicted for fraud, money fraud, I don't remember exactly what, but he founded the national bank, then he defrauded it. So I don't know. We might watch that. I think it would be interesting. But who would have known that the people at the bank were, so evil? But anyway, so we're gonna watch this really quickly. It's just a minute and so long, so.
Criminal Court, or ICC, is a global court based in the Dutch city of The Hague, with the power to prosecute individuals for war crimes, genocide, and aggression. The ICC becomes
Remember, every post-socialist country have at least a bunch of intelligence officers becoming top guys in the country, Putin being the peak of that. Yeah, I mean... it's the same thing too in some of the countries where the Soviet Union, under Khrushchev, right, were able to, in Angola, Mozambique, etc. They all, that aren't post-Soviet, right, but that because they were essentially reverted back to capitalism, they also have that same experience, but it's different. It's qualitatively different, I would argue. But so again, the court, both international courts are at The Hague, right? But they're not the same court. One prosecutes, or one is between countries, the ICJ, right? The ICC is people, individuals.
Involved when nations are unable or unwilling to prosecute crimes on their territory. And while the ICC has the power to prosecute cases, it has no police force of its own, instead relying on national police forces to make arrests. 124 countries have signed on to the treaty that created the court. While the U.S. was part of negotiations to set up the court, it is notably not a member. In 2023, the court issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin over crimes committed during Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia responded by issuing its own arrest warrants for ICC judges. More recently, arrest warrants were issued for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his former defense minister, and a Hamas leader. ICC member countries are required to detain suspects facing a warrant if they set foot on their soil, making travel abroad for those accused complicated. But ultimately, the court has no way to enforce any detention.
So, this is why a lot of people say that the court is, so to speak, toothless, right? That, and that it was, so to speak, meant to be so, right? That this is why I've heard criticisms of UN peacekeepers in Bosnia, what they do. Did they aid any side, like what Canadian troops did in Rwanda? Does the Peace Corps work with the ICC? Not as far as I know. The Peace Corps is run by the United States. And the United States is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, so it's the reason why a lot of war criminals end up moving to the United States. But also, they can also move to Russia. I mean, that's another one. And China. Essentially, the three imperialist powers of the world. Right? None of them are subject to the Rome Statute. Whereas all of Latin America is. But as we know from Europe, right after they all began, some of them said, yes. So I do have articles that go into stuff like that. But actually most of what you're describing, Powerful Finger, was actually the French. In fact, not necessarily the UN. Not saying that there wasn't any collusion with the UN during the genocide. I'm not going to say that. But hello, Ferret King. How are you? It's so good to see you. It's my best pal. By the way, did you see the pictures I put in my Discord of all the ferret stuff I found here in Ferrets are a huge thing here in Mexico. I don't know what it is. Like, I got here and I just see, like, Here, let me make sure to go check out the Ferret King. He's such a wonderful person and so kind. But yeah, like, they have, like, a little, like, okay, like they have a ball pit for weasels. For weasels. I mean, for ferrets. Pardon me, I didn't mean to say weasels. I was just... For ferrets. Like, it's amazing. And like, a whole bunch of people have them in Mexico City. Like, they love it. Yeah. They have a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't know if you saw the ones I tagged you in, but if you want, I could DM them to you because, oh my gosh, I didn't send all of them. Toss a ferret into a tub of packing peanuts. I know, yes! Yes, that's exactly what they did when I went there to, like, the pet store. They were like, oh my gosh, yes, I will send you more. The next time I go back, which will be soon, because I have to get special food for my eldest puppy, I will take more pictures because I was like, oh my god. I just, like, took pictures of what I could because I was holding so much stuff. But anyway. So right here, we're just going to watch a little bit, right? Because I want you to see the process, right? Again, it's not the most exciting thing, I will admit. I saw some ferrets at the pet supply store when I stopped by to get cat food and they were just snoozing though. So that's what they did, like, they had it so that way, so that way they would exhaust themselves, right? Because usually in the late afternoon, that's apparently when most people buy ferrets. So they wanted them to be kind of, like, tired and exhausted. So when I went, that's when they were letting them, play and everything, and they were running around. It was amazing. I was like, I wish I could teleport Ferret King here to Mexico City. Because this, like, everything. I mean, they had little clothes and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love it so much, you know. It was wonderful. So we're gonna watch a little bit now. Look, in my own research, right? I've had to watch trials, right? Witness testimony. I've seen a lot of stuff, right, at these trials. And they're not. And again, you know, courts aren't generally, you know, they aren't like the court shows on TV, right? Also, by the way, again, if you'd like to support me in some way, you can always do so by subscribing here on Twitch. And also, if you'd like to help out my research, highly would be appreciative if people would help sponsor the book, Recovering History, Constructing Race. It's actually a book that talks about something I've mentioned quite a lot on stream, which is Afro-Mestizos, right? So very much one of those books that's like, you know, needed. So.
Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Est maintenant ouverte. Je souhaite la...
Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone inside and outside of the courtroom. Now, before we start with today's initial appearance, I would like to remind you that the Chamber has authorised video recordings and the taking of photographs. Please go ahead.
Je vous remercie, vous avez une...
Thank you. You have 1 minute to take photographs and record.
Also, the two working languages of the court are English and French. Right? So that's another thing to keep in mind. Same thing with the ICJ. The working languages of the court are either French or English. So you can take your pick. Right? And this is done because, well, colonialist reasons, right? Not even Flemish, no. The reason why is, like, the reasoning why it's specifically French, so they say, is because French is more precise. That's what the argument has always been, is, oh, French is really precise when it comes to legal stuff. I'm like, I guess. I mean, you know, if you say so. French was the language of diplomacy. That too, right? It has that legacy, so.
Videos.
Let's get to a juicy bit. Okay.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the parties to introduce themselves, starting with the Office of the Prosecutor. Please pause before speaking and speak slowly to allow the interpreters to interpret appropriately. May I ask you to introduce yourself and to confirm whether the list of your staff that I received prior to the hearing is correct, Mr. Prosecutor?
Your Honours, good morning. The list is correct. Once again, Deputy Prosecutor Manjay Niang to my left, Trial Lawyer Edward Jeremy behind us.
You know, I gotta say, I wish that, you know, like, they already have the... I actually have... Which trial are we watching? Duterte's first audience before the International Court. So the former president of... Hello, Phoenix Dragon, welcome in. And yes, if you'd like to help my research in some way, you can go to the pinned comment in YouTube or the pinned chat here in the Philippines. That's right, here on Twitch, and you can help get this book funded. It's already 46% of the way there. Apparently, yes, exactly. And to think I lived in the Philippines during the time that he was president. And I've lived in Mexico when the drug war started, right, when it was at its most dangerous. I mean, people say it was more dangerous when I was younger, right? But it certainly, I don't know what to say. like people say it was worse because it was like you had groups like Los Zetas, right, that were just pure violence, right, that they didn't even care. He targeted reporters that try to be whistleblowers. I see. Not even talking about the well, you know, that has been something that we've talked about on stream, right? Red jacketing, right? Where they call someone a communist, right? Or whatever, and they use that to then excuse whatever. And a lot of that was actually taught, right, to the Filipinos, like bourgeoisie and government, right, to them by the United States and the French, actually, after what they did in Vietnam and in Algeria, right, as counterinsurgency tactics, first against the Moro insurgency, right, for their independence, and then against, you know, the growing Marxist-Leninist Maoist, at least that's what, you know, a lot of people would consider it as, theoretic, you know, in terms of its, like, orientation, right, theoretically. Insurgency that they have. But, I mean, you know. His targets were drug users, even saying, oh gosh. I mean, I have to say, Phoenix Dragon, and this is one of those things, right? I feel like there's a lot of people, even in the United States, that feel that same way about drug users, right? And the homeless, right? Just to use that term, you know, I typically use unhoused, but right? But because there's this, you know, that term is used in that way, right? It's one of those things where, you know, Duterte was a brutal president and they were so terrified of him no one could speak out while he was in power. I mean, like, again, I'm telling you, like, when I lived there, you know, if you, like, the only people that could even bring up things like Marx, I mean, again, in my experience, right, when I was there, were, like, foreign academics, right, in the university. Right, like nobody was talking about it outside. I mean, of course, I was aware, right, that there were, you know, the Communist Party of the Philippines, right, etc. Right, I knew that was out there, right, but in terms of like, oh, you know, bringing it up casually in conversation, so to speak, that was not like that was kind of like a thing you kind of had to intuit, right? Like, oh yeah, we don't, you know. Marx, she can't sit with us. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, during the Cold War, when the French lost, there were some intelligence officers who helped. Yes, before Marcos, teaching them counterinsurgency. Yeah, when they lost in Vietnam. Same thing with the United States after they lost in Vietnam, and also after they lost in Algeria as well. In fact, a lot, and then also South Africans, white South Africans, right? That were used in, you know, the counterinsurgencies, right, against the socialist, you know, like Angola, right, and Congo, etc., right. There was a lot of that, and a lot of Europeans too, like a lot of people from Belgium, you know, that made their living, quote unquote, right, being mercenaries in Central Africa. But yeah, and now there's another like crop of South African mercenaries that exist in, you know, which I don't know. It's but anyway.
Trial lawyer Robin Croft, international cooperation advisor Chantel Daniels, and our very able case manager Grace Go. I'm Kareem Khan, the prosecutor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I now turn to the counsel for the defense.
Let me see here. The son of the Albanian king went on an adventure in Rhodesia hunting insurgents. Oh gosh. By the way, you know, it was Rhodesia that, you know, because anybody, usually people that bring it up are not, are not good people, put it like that, typically. But did you know, like, at one point, they tried to sell the crown of Albania, like, literally, like, they were trying to find someone to be its king. And they almost got an American to do it, like an American, like, millionaire. When the Socialist Republic fell, he made a video, he made a photo in Albania dressed, oh gosh. Like, the worst thing is, like, I hate people that try to recreate those pictures, right, of the three guys. It's just like, again, like you said, so cringe, right? It's like, just all of it is just, I don't know. It's like, get out of Elon's closet, okay? Just stop.
Of Mr. Duterte. As everyone can see, Mr. Duterte is present and is attending the hearing via video link. As Mr. Duterte made a long journey involving a considerable time difference, the chamber authorised Mr. Duterte to follow the hearing at a distance. His counsel, however, is present with us in the courtroom. Thank you, counsel. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. I am Salvador C. Medjaldea, counsel for Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, counsel. I will now introduce the chamber. By my side, we have the Judge Rain Adelaide Sophie Alapine Gansu, the Vice President of the Court, and Judge Maria del Socorres Flores Liera. I am the presiding judge of the pretrial chamber 1 of the court, and my name is Julia Antonella Motok.
So I thought I would explain bit by bit, right, as we sort of watch this video. One thing that the ICJ and the ICC, right, I mean, the ICC has, for example, a document that sort of tells you, like, the rules of evidence. Again, I have all of the, I guess I have to say I had all of these, because I think I left them back in America. But point being, you know, there are things I had that were, you know, the full rules of evidence, the procedure of the court, etc. And one thing is that they try to get judges from different regions of the world, right? This is also why, like, the ICJ, just to compare it really quickly, why it has a large group of judges is because they want as diverse of a jurisprudential background, right, to cover the different schools of legal thought, right, to be present to determine, right, as opposed to setting, say, the French-based civil system, right, that is what, well, really most of the world has, because it's been either imposed upon them, right, and slowly you've seen it, you know, being taken back, right, that is to say, whatever the peoples of the nations that were colonized by the French or by other empires that had the civil law system, right, slowly, you know, get rid of some of those aspects and instead include more indigenous ones of their jurisprudence. But like Latin America, right, almost exclusively has the French civil, I mean, based off the French civil code, right? To the point where, again, again, I've studied, I am not a lawyer, but I've studied the law, right? Particularly constitutional law and the law of notaries, because that's actually, in Mexico, one difference between Mexico and the United States is that notaries are actually a really, really highly regarded position, because they far outweigh the average lawyer, right? Because they have to officiate documents and things like that. It's not like in America where you pay a fee and they give you a stamp, right? Your little stamp every year, and you just, you know, sign here, stamp, right? It's not like that at all. It's very, very different. But that's also because you're imbued with what is called la fe pública, right? The public faith, or the public, So, anyway. But point being that, again, the procedure of the court is more outlined when it comes to the ICC because it's building off of precedent set by... Is the Spanish law based on French law? Yes. Yeah, it is. It is. There are certain things, right, that, like, aren't handled exactly the same, right? Like land, I think I've mentioned before. There is a person that I knew back in California that he would, because of the Spanish grant system, land grant system, usually was based by way of water, right? Access to water, as opposed to just, a 2D drawing on a map. Often has to go to court to sort of prove, right, that, oh, well, here there used to be a stream, and that stream is actually the limit of their property, right? So there's actually a really good video, and now I'm considering watching it, of how there are two LAs, right? How, like, colonial Spanish law made one LA, and then, American imperial law, right, made a second LA, right? And how you can physically see it on the map. I might just, once we get through this, I might just bring that up. But yeah, because, like, one of the things, like, if you want to be a lawyer, one of the first things you learn, I think you do take it your first semester. I can't remember exactly the course of study, because, again, I didn't do it as though I was going to become a lawyer, right? I studied it in conjunction with history, genocide studies, etc., right? To know the law, right? Particularly human rights law, and constitutional protections thereof, right? Is that, yeah, like, right away you have to learn Roman law. Like, that's a huge deal. Roman law. And, yeah. Anyway. Let's see here. Hello! Hello, Philippe. Yes, knowledge is power, indeed. Yo, tell those Mexican ferrets to follow. Yes, please do. And yes, if you'd like to help me in some way, please, I would highly, highly suggest that you help me sponsor the book that is the pinned comment or the pinned chat in both chats, because we're so close to it being fully funded, but also make sure to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and to, if you'd like to subscribe, you can always do so for $5.99 or $6.99 on mobile, right? So that way you can have a month without ads. It's always welcome, for sure. So.
Now, I would like to speak to you, Mr. Duterte. I'm speaking French, but you are receiving interpretation of what I'm saying in English. I understand that you are at ease in the English language, and that the interview yesterday at the detention centre was conducted in English, and that you did not deem it necessary to request interpretation into any other language during this interview. This said, I would like firstly to confirm your identity. Could you provide us with your full names, please?
Young Rodrigo Roa Duterte. That's my first middle name is Roa. The surname is Duterte.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. What is your date of birth?
Again,
Can we request that the question be repeated? I don't think he heard it. Thank you.
Repetition from the English booth. What is your date of birth? Yes, thank you very much, Counsel. I was asking quite simply of Mr. Duterte what his full names were, and then I subsequently asked him what his date of birth was and what his place of birth is. Is that all right, Counsel?
Yep. Of course, I give. My birth the day is March 28, 1945. I was born in the province of Leyte in the Philippines.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. As a preliminary point, very well, thank you, Mr. Duterte. As a preliminary point, it is useful to clarify the nature and limited scope.
Okay, he said explicitly his surname is Duterte, and they still keep saying Duterte. It's... Come on. He just said it. He just said it's Duterte. Like, come on. He just said it. He seems quite stressed. Yeah, he is stressed. I mean, see, in a just world, right? All of the people, right? All of the people that have committed, right? Like, war crimes and shit, they would all be fucking nervous, right? Like, the fact that they act with so much impunity, you know, in the United States and in other places, right? Damn, he looks so good for 80 years old. Yeah, I mean, he obviously took care of himself, I guess. That does seem petty. Yeah, like, it's making me upset. Like, you know, like, come on. Like, because that always happens, right? It's like you tell someone, this is how you say my name, and they still want to say it wrong. Like, come on. You literally can't add the E at the end? Like, anyway. But, you know, like, it shouldn't be, right, that only people from colonized, semi-colonial, semi-feudal, right, imperialized countries should be afraid, right? If this court in the Netherlands can't hold accountable the people in the most powerful countries on the planet, then, you know, this court is something. I don't know. It's something. I don't know what to call it right now, but it's something. Maybe English speaker could mess it up, maybe. But yeah.
Of this first appearance hearing. Today's hearing is neither the start of the trial, nor is it a confirmation of charges hearing. During today's hearing, no evidence will be collected or presented, and the issues of Mr. Duterte's guilt or innocence will therefore not be addressed. In accordance with Article 61 of the Rome Statute, the Court's founding treaty, and Rule 1211 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the main purpose of this initial appearance is to answer 3 questions. Firstly, the Chamber must ensure that the person who was the subject of the arrest warrant has been informed of the crimes of which he is accused. Second, the Chamber must ensure that this person has been informed of his rights as recognised by the Rome Statute. Third, the Chamber must set a date on which it intends to hold a confirmation of charges hearing.
It's hyper procedural for a reason, right? Like, I get it, right? This is not like, oh, you know, like, the whole point of this court, right? And again, in a just world, right, all even first world leaders, right, would be, you know, quaking in their boots, right, at this, right? But it's to go over, right, the fact that you're still innocent until proven guilty. You still have, right, the right to an attorney, right? You still have the right against self-incrimination, right? Like, all of these things, right, that are there to protect, right, you know, the rights of the accused, right? So it's very procedural, yeah. But it's also because of the fact that, one, it is an international court, right? So some of these things are kind of new, right, so to speak. Like, that is to say, they're not typical things, right? They're not things that people typically focus on. right? Like, oh, that that you can be informed, you have to be informed of why you're even there. I see the grander the scale, the more procedural, right? Like, for example, like genocide trials, right? Like at the ICJ, right? They came to a conclusion in April where they said it's plausible that Israel is committing a genocide of last year. But it will be years before they come down with a ruling of whether or not they did or didn't commit a genocide, right? It's the same thing like this, because they have to let him know his rights. If the Americans had full control, you will be sent to Gitmo immediately if your adversary, right? Or worse, you'd be sent to El Salvador, like literally sold into slavery, like those men that were sent there to Secot, right? And now the administration is, we have no way to get him back. What do you mean? You have their names, you have all their information. But for $6 million, I guess, you can't find him anymore, right?
The Chamber notes that your counsel, Mr. Duterte, filed 2 motions. One in relation...
Hi, Fenefe, it's so good to see you. Hope all is well. I'm okay. I did move. I'm now back in Mexico. So there's that. Try to recreate a little bit of what my little streaming space was before, but I don't have. I mean, I tried to put up most of the posters I had, but it didn't look right. So instead, I'm just gonna put up different forms of art that I have here. I have a lot of religious art from different, Buddhist stuff. But yeah, I've been okay. I mean, I could be better, because right now I don't have a IRL job, right? So currently trying to deal with that. But besides that, generally okay. I hope that you're doing well. So the Trump admin now even want to deport Cubans, the people they used for over half a century, as quote-unquote communism doesn't work propaganda. The Venezuelan people, hello Igloo, welcome in, it's so good to see you. Even the Venezuelan people that they brought to the United States, they were also supposed to be the poster children, right, for that. Communism doesn't work. Communism being Maduro, of course, which isn't communism, but the Trump administration told them to come to the United States. Told them, right, that they would give them temporary protective status, right, as a way to stick it to, I'm in Mexico City. I wasn't gonna go back to Tijuana. And Colombia accepted 10 times more refugees. It's so sad to me, right, that there are like basic. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to get everything in order, right? But it's kind of difficult, right? Because it was sudden. I'll be honest, right? It was a sudden move. It wasn't something I, fully had planned out to happen. Yes, I moved to Mexico. Yes, yeah. I mean, like, I'm okay, right? Generally speaking, but, had to leave a lot of stuff, blah blah blah, which is whatever. But I had to leave. Like it was getting too much, way too much anxiety. So I just, which is why, like in my Discord, right, I do have information because, again, I've been looking it up for other people, as well, who want to try to find refuge here in Mexico. God knows how many people. Wait. Hold up. Hello, good for Gabby. Welcome in. It's so good to see you. God knows how many people will be left in Gaza by that day. Oh no. I don't even want to. That's. Yeah. Phoenix Dragon, I like, trust me, if you need help, again, you're a mod in my server. You're always welcome to ask me for help. I like helping all the people. Anybody I can. I mean, that's my thing. Like, even for the classes that I'm going to start teaching, right? Which, by the way, yes, I'm going to teach classes, right, including a Spanish class for people that want to learn, a history and theory course, and then also a critical theory course, right? That's more like just more general, right? Reading philosophy and stuff like that, right? Well, yeah, I get that. But here, let me see if I can find a link to my courses. I kind of feel weird because, like, oh, courses, right? But yeah, I have courses now. But again, there are more. So I have 2 courses up right now, which is history. China recently put my country on a list of being able to go there without a visa for 10 days. IDK if this measure puts tourism purpose or mix between that and business trips. Don't feel weird, you're an amazing person who teaches folks and teaching is work. Yeah, I mean, here is the link to one of them. And then the other class that I'm planning on teaching is the history of Latin America, the colonial period. Has the government there made repatriation easy? Yes and no. It has made it easy for, like, there are a lot of programs. The issue is it's all dependent on how you, like, it's dependent on other things. That's one of the problems. For them to give you, but in terms of, like, here, let me put them also in the YouTube chat. Again, I'm also going to be teaching a Spanish course if people want to take it. And again, this, these courses are going to be college level, right? But I mean, sorry, I was distracted for just a quick second. I kind of lost my train of thought. Yes, they have made repatriation easy. They have what are called héroes paisanos or something along those lines, and that program helps reintegrate you right back into the Mexican workforce, right? It tries to give you benefits. It tries to make up for time lost, so to speak, right? And so, yeah, like, in terms of reintegration, yes, it helps. However, I don't qualify for a lot of those programs, so that's why I'm like, well, kind of, but it doesn't work for me. So, oh yeah, and make sure to follow Igloo for sure. But yeah, also, again, if you'd like to help out my research, I'm really so thankful that, you know, people even are even here listening to me now, right? But and so I don't know, I'm just, oh gosh, like, I wish I knew a better way that I could, you know, because I can keep streaming, I can keep, you know, all of this stuff, but I really wish that I could make it, you know, clear for all of you, right, just how much it all means to me, right? That people help me at all. I never expected any of this, right? I really didn't. I thought this would be an instant flop. So I thank you for anything that, you know, you can give, even if it's just, you know, a thumbs up or a like, I should say, right, on YouTube, or subscribe. Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Igloo. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the subscription. Because yeah, like, I need to make things work now that I'm here. So, because yeah. Yes, you can definitely check out my YouTube. But yes, if you'd like to take, thank you so much, Mono. That is so sweet of you. But yes, if you'd like to take one of the courses, again, you can do so. If anything, just ask me, because also you can also go to Patreon, and you can also, thank you so much, good for Gabby. Yes, 750 more YouTube followers, that's right. Also, if you go to Patreon, I think that you actually can get them for a different rate, because it lets you pay it by month as opposed to all at once, which, I don't know, some people prefer just to pay for the whole thing all at once, but if you go there, you will see 3 tiers of the history. It's like history, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so you can do it like that if you'd like. So then that way you don't have to necessarily pay the full amount right away. You can pay it in monthly installments. So, yeah. No point having 2 thumbs and only using one, right? So yeah, if you'd like to take those courses, again, I intended to start them as soon as possible, but it's kind of hard for me to advertise, especially when I'm not streaming, right? So again, if you're interested and you're in the Discord and you're serious about taking the courses, right, just let me know, so that way I can, some of the syllabuses I've already put on there, like for the history course, the first one, the history in Latin America, I am still constructing that syllabus, and the Spanish course is done. I already put up that syllabus. I just haven't put it up on Gumroad yet. But yeah, again, if people are interested, right? But also, again, you can also help me in other ways. Like I said, like sponsoring this book. It's currently 46%, by subscribing to Twitch or donating directly via the different links below. But I was thinking about it, I'm like, the trial is interesting, but it's interesting to me, right? Like, I am used to watching these trials. And I think instead, we should watch this video, right? Which talks about why is LA crooked, right? And I think it's a very interesting video, and then we'll get into some Mexico stuff, right?
More than half of the US today is covered in a square grid. Miles and miles aligned to the cardinal directions. This is true for most of LA, with one major exception. The story about why the heart of the city is crooked is actually a story about who builds the frameworks we live in. A huge reason I started making videos about cities is because of this chart. The world population didn't cross 1 billion people until the year 1800. Now there are 8 times the amount of people on this planet. The world we walk through is new. These time lapses only show the last 40 years. And those who decide the frameworks of these cities determine how we navigate it. And in the case of Los Angeles, the framework was decided largely by 2 people who never even stepped foot in California.
When you look at a map of Los Angeles, you're seeing the intersection of coastline, mountain, and valley that creates a distinctive landscape. And it is
So this is why, when people talk about LA, right? Usually, when I would talk about LA, right, I meant this entire area visible on the map, right? Not just the city of LA, so to speak. But one thing is that there are a lot of different valleys, right? Because there's a lot of coastal mountains, right? Like the St. Gabriel Mountains, etc., right? So, like up here, if you can see my cursor, right? I believe you can, right? Where there's like these 3 different rivers, right? That's the valley, right? You know, the Valley Girl accent is from that area, right? Down here, these weird little islands, right? That is the port of Long Beach. One of these islands, at the time during World War II, was actually, if you've ever read Farewell to Manzanar, right, which talks about the internment camps, right, the Japanese internment camps that they had. It starts off with her mom working, if I remember correctly, here on Terminal Island, which they saw as a security threat because, again, there was lots of, like, maybe it wasn't her mother, maybe someone else, but they saw it as a security threat because they're like, oh, all of these Americans that happen to also be of Japanese heritage work right here, right? And it was in the canning industry. And right here is right here, this river, right, is what is most important, right? As I mentioned before, Spanish land grants almost exclusively, right, needed a source of water, right? Like, that was the thing, right? You have to have a source of water. This is why I knew of people at USC, people at Cal State Fresno, people at, you know, the University of San Francisco, different people that work particularly in the libraries, right, whose specialty is, right, knowing about these land grants that still form the basis of their property, right, that were transferred over, but that have to have their, you know, like, it doesn't fit with the typical 2-dimensional, right, square system that the United States has, right? Because it doesn't take into account the need for water. Oh, damn, that's an amazing deal. Okay.
distinctive relationship of place and people.
The landscape here is dry and hot, except for, of course, the 3 days I decided to visit, rained the whole time. The main source of life is the river from which the city got its name. The cultural and historical impact of the river far outweighs its actual size. I was surprised to learn that starting in the San Fernando Valley, it's only 51 miles long. Today, its course is paved in...
Oh my gosh. Okay. So when people tell me, like, when I think of the LA River, right? I usually think of the riverbed, which is this. Like, this is what I know when it comes to LA. Right? Like you know it's real when like you've seen cars down here, you've seen all sorts of like, you know, on purpose, right? And also I believe in the movie Grease at one point they're down there too. Like it's one of those things like quintessentially LA. But one thing to keep in mind is in order to not be subject to the rules and regulations when it comes to the Clean Water Act, right? Among other things, which says that, you know, navigable rivers have to be protected in a certain kind of way, they never let people actually try to kayak or canoe or whatever up the LA River. Because if they were to prove that it's navigable, then immediately LA would have to treat it like a river that it would have to protect it, right, ecologically. And so it doesn't want to do that, so it doesn't allow people to even... Yeah, go Grease Lightning. I'm referring to the history course you're teaching. Yes. Again, the Latin American history... so they don't want people to use a river to prove it's a river. Yeah, I mean, they don't want it to prove that it's navigable, right? Like, they wanted it to be like, yeah, it's water, but it's not water that could transport people. Because then they'd have to keep it clean so that people could, you know. But yes, hello. Wait. Oh, crowd. For a moment there, I thought you said coward. I was about to say, what? Hello, Renee. How are you doing? It's good to see you. But yes, the History of Latin America course, we're going to be talking about... we're talking about the colonial period, particularly, right, from... we're going to talk a little bit about 1492 and all, but we're really going to start 1519, and then looking particularly at the Viceroyalty of New Spain, and then also looking at the Captaincy of Nueva Granada, right, the Captaincy of Cuba, right, and we're going to be discussing quite a few things. So again, if you'd like to, maybe Yukio Mishima might see us as cowards. I don't know. Novara? Okay.
Meant, but historically, it changed its route a lot.
It would swing like a giant pendulum from Santa Monica to Alamitos Bay.
That's because a lot of this area...
So, yeah. One thing about LA, again, is like, okay, I'm actually glad that they actually put the cities here. So, Vernon, right, like this area, and this area right just above Vernon is known as South Central, right? This is South LA, right, which is typically seen as where Black Americans live, right? Because you have, you know, Compton and other cities, right? Then here, going this way, right, you have East LA, which is historically where Mexicans, right, but also other Latinx people could live. Now, the boundaries of LA have changed over time, right? Now LA is this massive city that just... but at that time, people of color, right, could not live in the city of LA, right? This is why LA's downtown is quite small, because essentially West LA, right, so Santa Monica, all of this stuff over here, Hermosa Beach, was segregated only for white people, right? That is why none of the, like, all of these huge freeways over here, right, do not exist in West LA, right? You really only see the 405 right here, and that's about it, right? But that's because, like, they needed to have a way to get to places, you know, that was more for a contingency reason, right? But as you can see, right, the reason why the river would change its course so much is because there are two basins, right? Santa Monica, and then the other one that goes down through to Compton and Carson and down this way, right? And then by Los Alamitos by Seal Beach. And Anaheim is where Disneyland is. So, anyway. But you see here, right, like, there are all of these different areas. Usually, like, when I talk about LA, I mean this entire area, right? But yes, South LA was typically where African Americans had to live, because over here is Watts, you know, this is Compton, there's Willowbrook, etc. Over here's East LA, right? So you have, you know, etc. Hello, the big room. It's so nice to see you. How are you doing? And before, right, West Hollywood and Beverly Hills, well, West Hollywood in particular, right, it was the closest you could live that did not have restrictive covenants, right? So, that was where queer people and Jewish people could live, which is why there is a large Jewish population that lived in what is now West Hollywood, right? Because it wasn't part of LA yet. And also in what is Beverlywood and Beverly Hills, right? Like they were there before they became what we know them as now, right? So, thing to keep in mind. But later on, when LA expanded, and these are different cities, but when this started to be, people wanted to live in these foothills, right, of these mountains, right? That's when you start to get, right, the Beverly Hills becomes very exclusive and everything. The Captaincy of Nueva Extremadura, Chile, aka Chicanos to Hondureños, Megapolis. Well, now the whole, Skid Row is just one area. Orange County is where the 1%ers live. I mean, yeah. WeHo, the infamous Abbey. Yeah. Like, I don't know. To me, the Abbey's boring. I don't know. That's just me.
It is the same low elevation, making it a very wide floodplain. Not an ideal place for a major modern city.
The grand joke about Los Angeles in the late 19th century is there was no reason for it to be there, except at some point the Spanish Empire decided someplace had to be there, and there it was.
The Americas are scattered with Spanish cities, remnants of their massive colonial empire. St. Augustine, Florida is one of their early cities and the oldest city in the U.S. When Columbus landed in the Caribbean in 1492, Spain wasn't even sure if these were just islands or if they were part of a bigger continent. But before Spain fully understood what they...
Oh my goodness. Yay! We're having a hype train. Oh my goodness. Thank you so very much. Ooh! Yes! We're having a hype train. Level 2. Ooh, we have 4 minutes, and thank you so very much, the big room. That I really appreciate that. Yes, I know, Jelly. I know. 3 big balls, I know. Now I have to pull out the good music. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think it's here. Please. Okay, here we go. Yes.
Now, we're going to do something we haven't done in a while. So, over the last week or so, there's been a lot of attention paid to a music video we're going to get into in just 1 second.
Yes, there is. Big dick. Big old dick.
3
big balls.
Look like we played tennis. He got a big dick.
I think his name Dennis.
I jerked his dick until that N-word finish. His dick big and green. It tastes just like
spinach. Dudes. I like when they send me all the nudes.
Had to make him nut cause his balls
were blue. He didn't have a clue.
He's sliding in and out my ass like he's cleaning out gutters. Dick bigger than a stick of butter. So the big dick swinging up in the motherfucking hallway. He liked me and my friends cause we were all gay. We like dick. I like his ass cause it's thick. And he going to fuck my butt till I shit and dick is dry, so therefore I spit on the tip. And it gets significantly more vulgar.
Also, hello, Jelly. Welcome in.
A
lot more vulgar.
For
big guys. And they bust on my eyes.
They eat my ass just like apple pie. If they keep fucking me like this, I might just die. They bite my booty till I cry. He licked my dick and the cum start dripping. I took a bite of his ass. It tastes like open pepper chicken. He throw me up in the air. My booty flipping. He dunking his balls in my booty like he Scottie Pippen. Met the N-word last night. And I rode his dick like a bike. He's so thick, he looks like a dyke. But let's say, hypothetically, I think his name Mike Jordan. He fucked me while recording. He sent me butt pics this morning. Hands down, the greatest news I received. I love when I receive his BBC. Three big balls. Look like we playing tennis. He got a big dick. I think his name Dennis. I jerk his dick until that N-word finished. His dick big and green tastes just like spinach. Dudes. I love when they sent me all the news. Had to make him nut cause his balls were blue. He didn't have a clue. He's sliding in and out my ass like he's cleaning out gutters. Dick bigger than a stick of butter. So the big dick swinging up in the motherfucking hallway. He liked me and my friends cause we're all gay. We like dick. I like his ass cause it's thick. And he going to fuck my butt till I shit and dick is dry, so
therefore I spit on the tip. Okay. So that is our hype train music. We still have 1 minute and 26 seconds for people to resultant from the dryness. Indeed. We still have 1 minute and 15 seconds to try to make it to another level on this hype train. Otherwise, hola, ¿cómo estás? Oh my gosh. Outrageous. Oh, it is my hype train. It is my hype train anthem. Oh, nomás aquí platicando de diferentes cosas. Ahorita estamos hablando de Los Ángeles. La historia de Los Ángeles. Oh, thank you so very much, Jelly. Oh, thank you so much, The Big Room. Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you so much for the gifted sub for Jelly. And yes, do make sure to check out. Is there lemon pepper? Do make sure to. Oh, good. Okay, that's good. I laughed today. Thank you. De chaperito que necesito un poco de diversión. Well, you know how it is. Oh, who's this diva emote? Yes. Oh, I love that emote. I love the magnifying glass emotes. I don't know why. I just do. Because it's always like, I need to be like inspecting, you know? So, anyway, as we were. Oops. What am I opening up? Thoughts on Elon's daughter interview? Yeah, but that is our hype train anthem. Every time we hit a hype train on Twitch, we play the Three Big Balls song. So, just that is the law.
Had just discovered the Pope, who was Spanish, by the way, drew a line through the Atlantic and granted everything west of that line to Spain and everything east of that line to Portugal. At the time, no one realized that a little bit of land.
Oh, let's see. What should you name your sub baby? I don't know. Look like we playing tennis, right? Right. I think his name Dennis. Like, come on, that is iconic. Iconic. Shax Jr. I mean, I don't know. Do girls usually get named Shax Jr.? Like juniors? They don't usually get called that, right? That's not a typical thing for girls. Like I've never met a girl that's like Junior. You know, that's not a. They should. Okay, fine. Shax Jr. Shax Jr. It's sexist. I mean, there's a lot of things that are sexist, but I mean, I never liked it. But then also at the same time, a certain streamer that shall not be named ruined the second. I love when they send me all the right. Oh gosh, that song is so good. It's just so good. Also, oh my gosh, the big room. I was gonna tell you something and I forgot. I was gonna tell you in Discord, but I don't think you're in my Discord. Which, by the way, everybody should be in my Discord. But, oh gosh, now I forgot. Milkshacks? Ah, yes. I like that. I prefer the Russian suffix. Was he Spanish? With Hassan? Question, though. I don't know. I don't know, Renee. That is not something that I'm exactly, like... I'm in your Discord. I don't check it for your girlfriend, though. No, I'm saying that I just forgot what I was going to tell you, because it was something important. Something. I will remember. It's just right now. Shakspierova. True. Shakspierova.
Was on the east side of that line, and that unintentionally led to the creation of Brazil. So with the Pope's blessing, Spain felt this divine right to exploit this new world, and that's exactly what they did. Their settlements fell into three main categories. Missions were created to spread Catholicism, presidios were created as military bases, and pueblos were created as civilian towns.
I like how they act as though it was this neat, right? There was always military at the missions. There was always, and spread Catholicism is, I mean, any spread of anything is, the only thing you should be spreading is, well, among other things, peanut butter and jelly, right? That is, absolutely shoot me a message on Discord. Okay, no worries. Have a good rest of your night. But yeah, military installation. Let me see here. Jelly mentioned, gritty good. Same thing with civilian towns. It's not like, they were only in presidios. Presidios were a type of fortification, right? Again, anyway.
So in 1781, the Pueblo of Los Angeles was created. Because each of these settlement types had different priorities, they followed different town planning principles. So you can look at several different pueblos that were established by the Spanish, and they all follow these same concepts. These principles are laid out in the Law of the Indies, which is basically the Spanish guidebook to colonization. In 1573...
I mean... Did Presidio change in time to mean jail? Yeah, it did change. Because initially it meant, up until the 1840s, it's still, really the 1830s and 1840s, it still had more of a military meaning. But it's after a while, it begins to be more associated with people being brought into the Presidio, right? Nuestra Señora de Los Angeles. The Jesuits have military training. Hey, you know what? I wouldn't, and Brazil and Portugal invading Uruguay. One thing too, milkshacks, I know, right? Brings all the boys to the yard, and they're weren't there a whole bunch of private ranchos around LA? Yes, outside of the pueblo. right? The pueblo was for outside of the pueblo's jurisdiction, right? That's where the land grants come in, right? And that's where people could own. In fact, Pico Rivera, right? Like that street, right? The Pico family, right? They were one of the families that were allowed to stay by the Americans once they colonized it, right? Hence why they named the street, right? Because he was a collaborator. He had a huge estate, yeah. So just outside of it, and he's gonna get into it right now, like what the parameters were. Haciendas, excuse me, was checking out. I love e-collars. When do we bring them back? Not just for our pets when they're sick. Huh. Haciendas. Oh, well, it depends because in Nueva España, a lot of times they would call them ranchos, depending on what they did, right? Did presidio conserve its meaning somewhere, or did the meaning change everywhere? As far as I know, I can't think of any place that still uses presidio to mean a military installation. So like if it's like if they were ganaderos, right, it was different than if they were like with encomenderos, right? But there was a there were haciendas, but those were usually in Mexico proper, right? Like, and we'll fundos for latifundio, yeah. Like, it's like fincas. I wonder if those bots ever actually get any business. I don't even know. Like, literally, I don't know. So I'm not sure if they did, but as far as I know, I can't think of any example after the 1840s, like particularly like anything from, if it did, the only place I could possibly see it still being used would probably be in the parts of the Caribbean that stayed Spanish colonies the latest, like Cuba and Puerto Rico. Those are the only place. Because in other places, like that mainly because that system went away, right? Because then it was like fortalezas, right? Like there was a different need for stronger things, right? Presidios were just like kind of out of, they weren't really useful anymore once war itself changed, right? My heart goes out to, oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Okay, so anyway, this is King Philip II, who very famously, right, had the if you've ever heard of the Palace of El Escorial, right, the very beautiful palace outside of Madrid. So he has his bed, right, like, there in the palace, right? But they built a huge, Catholic cathedral, right, in the middle of the palace. And if you open the door that's just to, if you're facing his bed, right, it would be on your left-hand side. But if you were lying down on the bed, it would be on your right-hand side, right? If you open the door, right there is the high altar of the church, of the cathedral. That's how, Catholic he was, right? Like that's how zealous he was in his faith. Right?
King Philip II, the King of Spain, outlined these laws of the Indies, making him the first of the two individuals that never stepped foot in California that decided its current framework. Not only did these dictate how to lay out a city, but where to lay out a city. According to the laws, it needed to be near a water source, higher in elevation, but not too high, and far enough from the ocean to stay away from pirate.
So see, again, this is different from what the United States did, right? The United States just never required there to be water. That's why you can literally still buy a patch of desert and, and you see them. Like, I remember when I would travel like even to visit friends that like because if you go to Needles, California, right, they have the Colorado River, and like some people they have like you can get like there are some houses that that like are back up to the river, right? So some people go there, blah blah blah, you know, different things, right? But when you're driving out there, right, you see all of this land for sale. A lot of it is just literally just empty desert, right? But it's all, you know, if it's not federally owned or owned by the state of California or whatever state, like say you drive into Nevada or whatever, right? Then you know you can buy it. But there is no need for a water source, right? And so that is something that also affected. Yes, vast tracts of land. Yes. Whereas in Spain, you might not get as big of a land grant because it starts off with, is there a water source, right? Because if there isn't, then they're like, why on earth would you want to be there, right? Then you're not going to be successful, right? But yeah,
it seems a little odd to think about Los Angeles being founded as a haven from pirates. But in the 1780s and earlier, the coastline of Southern California had been visited by a variety of potential threats. And so Los Angeles, about 25 or 30 miles away from the ocean, although inconvenient for ocean transportation and shipping, meant that the city was not going to be attacked by...
Right. So that is also the reason why LA proper is inland, because, you know, there be pirates, literally. Because, you know, English privateers and everything, right, would go up and down. If I recall, there was a surveyor who proposed the western states be grouped by watershed. Yes, you're right. You're right. That they essentially... but you know what's interesting? The people that actually were... some of the people that were against things like that were actually the Mormons. Because they wanted Deseret to be its own state, right? And so they didn't want it to be defined by the rivers, because otherwise then it would make Utah very small, right? So instead they're like, just give us this weird square with the chunk bit now. Curse you, Brigham Young. Yes. It still surprises me to this day that that like the reason why St. George, Utah, became what it is, right? Like this, you know, the winter home of Brigham Young, is, you know, one, you know, because it's has a better, you know, it doesn't snow like in Salt Lake or whatever, but like the fact that it has this college called Dixie State College, and I'm just like, why would you call it that? Like, you're not in Alabama or something. But it's because one of the things... Yeah, Dixie State College is not in Alabama. It's in southern Utah. And that's because that's what Brigham Young would call it. He would call it Dixie. Because he made them in that area, right? Because it's warmer, right? Grow cotton. I kid you not. That's why it's called Dixie. Because they started growing Mormon cotton. It's I know, a weird thing. So this building here, the one that looks like 4 like cans of beer, right? Sort of around a central thing. This one is actually very famous. It's the Westin Bonaventure Hotel, and Friedrich Jameson, if I remember correctly, wrote about this building being the epitome of postmodernism. So if you ever want to read about the Westin Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles, you can read it. This tower up here, I don't think you can see it actually. I'll bring it up in a second. But this tower right here, the one that where my cursor is at, it's very tall. But at the very top, there's a slide where you can, it's made out of like, you know, that type of like reinforced plasticky glass. I don't know exactly what it's called, but so that way you can safely slide down like 5 stories, right? But you're outside and you're like hanging on the edge, and over here, oh no, wait, you can't even see that because I'm in the way. But anyway, Utah was going to be its own country. Yeah, that's true. Deseret, which I still find it interesting that it meant beehive in the language of whatever, right? Beehive. It just happened to sound like desert. So southern Utah, southern U.S. I mean, again, if you want to look into the history of the Latter-day Saints' relationship to race, particularly against black people, you can research that yourself. But it's not, it's not progressive. I'll put it like that. But we also have to remember that this part of the world, this part of the United States, right, like Arizona, right, was part of the Confederacy, right? So it's not, so you're not far off, right? Like southern Utah, a lot of them fought, a lot of them went down to what became Confederate Arizona. Raphites, but you see that, didn't they start? Yes, in like the 70s, yeah. Within Mitt Romney's lifetime, yet when he was an adult, right, is when they started to accept people of color, and they began to say that, our old belief, right, that blah 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 is wrong. We no longer believe it. Within his lifetime, and no interviewer has ever asked him about that, right? That he grew up and was an adult and believed that. But what can I say? Like I think to me it would actually be an interesting thing to ask, right? Whenever I pass the main Mormon temple by the bike lane here in Santiago, I shout, "Out of my way, Raphite on the road." Oh my gosh. Jeez. But what else was I gonna say? But yes, also that part of Arizona that became part of the Confederacy, which was southern Arizona, it essentially was most of the land that the United States bought, or compelled Mexico to sell, as sometimes some scholars put it that way. That was named La Mesilla, right? Because Ducci said exclusion there. Right, exactly. How about the breakaway faith in northern Mexico? Which one? You mean like the Mennonites? Because there's a lot of Mennonites in Mexico. In fact, like that's it has a Plattdeutsch, Low German, has a protected status in Mexico. So I don't know if that's what you mean, or if you mean the LDS that also, a lot of them that moved to northern Mexico as well. I mean, and that's why Mitt Romney's dad was born in Mexico, right? And I still don't understand. And again, this is the thing, right? This shows you that the term Mexican, right, is a racialized term, because even though Mitt Romney's father is white, because he was born in Mexico, they're like, but he's Mexican though, like. The bigamous. Well, a lot of it had to do with the fact that they felt that especially in the aftermath of the revolution, right, or like during the revolution, and its immediate, they felt that there was gonna be hard for the government to do anything. I mean, and even in the 1890s, or like in lead up to the revolution, right? Like so much land was just sold off to whoever was the highest bidder under the Porfiriato. So, okay.
Foreign powers or marauding pirates.
Some of the laws of the Indies, like the New Law of the Indies, which came before the Law of the Indies, was outlined to protect the indigenous population. Those were ignored. One of the other principles about where to choose a place was if it was near an indigenous population.
Whose members could be drafted into forced labor to provide labor for the new colonial city.
In the case of LA, it was near a Yanga village. Unfortunately,
well, this is so typical. I mean, again, it's it's right. This was also something that was institutionalized in a much more structured way. I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't structured here, but in the encomienda system, right, where literally indigenous people were like essentially rented out slave labor, right? And that didn't stop until Bartolome de las Casas wrote his, a brief description of the destruction of the Indies, right? The only issue, and he did come to regret it though, was he said we should do what the Portuguese do, which was have black chattel slavery. So, but at first, right, yeah, history's very complex.
We don't know exactly where this was, but when Union Station was under construction, artifacts from the original Yanga village were...
By the way, as someone who has it's unfortunate, right? Because his defense of the indigenous people, that's good, but unfortunately his solution, quote unquote, right, was disastrous. But he did come to regret it. He did see that he did something wrong, right? And again, I'm not saying this to exculpate him, right? But this disproves the idea, right, that people were just like that back then, right? That has never been the case at any point in history. Like this belief that everybody thought that was okay back then. No, you have someone that is, people were thoughtful at all points of history. I don't know why, people, it's precisely the people that say, we wish that things were historically accurate, that want history to be flattened and to be, right, narrativized in, without any actual context, without any actual, right, because there were people that were against chattel slavery from the beginning. They weren't unfortunately they weren't the majority, but there were people, right, that said, what are you doing, right? Are saying that your justification is bullshit, right? But, we don't really hear. Or the Mapuche revolted and won, right? I mean, and it's funny because it says here Yanga, a Yanga village, right, which is the name, which is a demonym, right, of a people that lived in the LA basin, right? But Yanga is also the name of the first free city of self-emancipated black people in the entire Americas, in Mexico. So I've always liked to allude to that connection, right? That Yanga was the first place that people were able to actually manumit themselves, right? Actually break the chains, right? And defeat the Spaniards so that they could never be returned back into slavery. So that eventually they were given their own land, right? Just like how the Mapuche revolted and won, right? Because again, for example, in the course that I'm giving in Latin American history, the colonial period, one of the largest things that we're going to talk about is the slave trade, right? We're going to be talking about how slavery is almost completely omitted in the United States when it comes to talking about Latin America, right? They might talk about it when they talk about Brazil a little bit, maybe Cuba sometimes, very seldom though, but they never go into anywhere else, right? And that is a huge lacuna that has to be, it needs to be addressed. But anyway.
Discovered. Even though they disregarded the law of the Indies when it came to the treatment of the indigenous population, the colonizers did follow it when it came to town planning principles, starting with the town center. We're kind of in the middle of a information war, and it can be really difficult to understand what is going on in the world and what to believe. And that is why I use today's sponsor, Ground News.
No.
Ground News is the tool I use to be a more responsible consumer of the news. Using 3 independent
Ethical
news monitoring organizations,
React.
they rate over 50,000 sources on their bias, factuality, and ownership, so that you know where your news is coming from. You can either use an app on your phone or the web browser to see how things are being reported on the left, center, and right. And it's really interesting to compare different headlines. For example, while I was working on this video in response to the LA wildfires, Trump opened up a dam in California to release a bunch of water. This was pretty controversial, and if you look on Ground News, you can see that it was reported on the...
Oh yeah, it did nothing. Of course it did nothing. Like, he still believes the lie that, like, California didn't do whatever blah 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 to save like this tiny little fish that is already went extinct. Like literally, it was a group of it was a group of farmers. You know, they have big landholders, right? From the southwestern part of the Central Valley, if I remember correctly, right? And their whole thing is repeating the same crap, like, oh, they don't give us enough water, blah blah blah, because they do this to save the fish, which is already extinct, by the way. So what does President Trump do? He says, oh, they didn't have any water for this, so he just, I forget how much it was like so many gallons of water that literally just went out to sea. So it didn't even help the firefighters. Right? It didn't even help anything. He literally just wasted water that could have been kept in storage for use for potable water, etc., etc. But again, that lobbying group that loves to tell that stupid story about the fish done anything hecking else. Right, literally could have done anything else. But no, he released water from a river that flows north, away from where the fires were. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It makes no sense. Reservoir water. So LA had a Plaza de Armas too. Yeah. Right now he's gonna show you Olvera Street, which is like the original site, and you'll see, like, it has El Kiosco, you know, that whole stuff, you know, reservoir water, right? And the one reservoir that right wingers all focused on, right, was so tiny it wouldn't have lasted like enough for it to, and one, it was covered by, like, you know, literally it's surrounded by trees and houses, so everything that burned. So it just happened to be being cleaned at the time because it's and again, this is because, again, like, I actually this is back when I lived in LA, right? They had to clean the lining, right, which prevents like algae and bacterial stuff. So they were doing the right thing, right? But then the fire happened, right? So they couldn't do anything about it. But the amount of water that it held in there was like, it would have been only working for like 4 hours, right? These fires lasted days, weeks, right? So, yeah. But yes, opening up the floodgates and making the water go up the San Jacinto River did nothing.
Left and the center, but not reported on the right at all. Which leads me to one of my favorite features that Ground News offers, which is the blind spot feature. The blind spot tool shows you what's not being reported.
For some reason, I have this like vague memory of like people calling out Ground News, but I just don't even, like, for one, the whole like political spectrum that it uses doesn't even make sense, because, like, I mean, literally the Republican Party or whatever, they're this party that's forming in Mexico that's supposed to be the, like, essentially the Republican Party in Mexico. They said what is actually true. They said, well, both the Democrats and the Republicans are right wing. I'm like, yes, that's true. Like, literally, you know, they have no pull. Like, literally, they failed to reach. Well, they failed the first attempt, which was recent in 2024. They're trying to do it this time again because they think they have enough. I mean, obviously they're getting tons of money from the Americans, right? Ground news creators are enlightened centrists, but it's still a good app. Okay, yeah, because I remember some people were like saying that it was iffy, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't tend to read the, like, I'm sorry, I am not gonna listen to Chris Hayes. Look, I just gotta be honest. If that is the most left-wing person on the mainstream news, I'm sorry, I am not gonna listen to him. Okay.
On either side of the spectrum. They do this with upwards of 20 stories every day, and it gives you a more well-rounded view of what is being reported. You can get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is the plan I use to get access.
It's very marginal. Like, honestly, like, I haven't heard it being talked about except for when they found out that the founder of it had ties to, like, neo-Nazis. So, you know. But the spokesman, who apparently didn't have those links, was like, you know, when he was trying to explain where they were, like, their position vis-a-vis politics, they're like, well, because he's a dual citizen, right? American and Mexican. And he says, well, the Democrats and the Republicans are both right-wing. We know this because they're both pro-capitalism. I'm like, yes, finally, someone understands that, yes, it is not about policy positions. Oh, I want more taxes for the rich. That does not make you a leftist, sorry. Like, capitalism, yes or no? If you're no, you're on the left. If yes, you're on the right. Like, there is no, stop with all this, oh, well, I like this policy, so I'm a little bit here, and I'm, no. It's easier than you think. It's easier than you think, right? Bourgeois politics has everybody's mind just... But, again, the right wing spells it out because they know how it actually is. Pro-capitalism, anti-capitalism. Simple. Right? And that's what they said. So I believe them, right? Like Toni Morrison says, right? When someone tells you who they are, believe them. And so I heard him what he said, and he said, the people that we, you know, blah, 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 the Democrats and the Republicans, they're both right-wing because they're both pro-capitalism. Okay. There, that's all I needed to hear. Thanks.
As to all of their tools by going to the link at the top of the description, scanning the QR code on screen, or going to ground.news/.
Does that party want to be more right-wing? I mean, yeah, they essentially want to be like the Republican Party, but in Mexico. But that just is not popular. I mean, again, the current ruling party, right, Morena, has a hyper majority in like 80% of the seats in both houses of parliament. They have a huge, either a supermajority or a hyper majority. You know, like that whole, oh, we need to cut back on social spending and we need to, you know, means test everything. Like, why? Right? Like, that just does... why? Right? Like, Mexico, since NAFTA, right, the original NAFTA, right, came into force in 1994, but technically since 1992, right, Mexico had not raised its minimum wage until the last sexennium, right, the last administration. That's a long fucking time to not raise your minimum wage. Now, and people might say, oh, this is whatever. now it's revised up every year to keep up with inflation. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but it's better than what it was before. Right? Because almost 30 years of no growth of the average of the minimum wage. Now for it to grow every single year is a good thing, right? That is progress. So then that is, but yeah, there are some people who want to be more right-wing for whatever reason. I will never know.
Daniel Steiner, and signing up there. Huge thank you to Ground News for sponsoring this video. I really believe in their product, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. Okay, let's get back to the video about Los Angeles. I met up with Glenn Creason, who worked as the map.
I will say one thing that I do miss the LA Central Library, the one that's downtown. It's very beautiful. Like, it's this wonderful mix of different styles, but I loved all of the murals. And Glenn is actually someone I've met before because I love maps, so I would, as I, literally have a map of Mexico behind me. But, like, if you want to go see, like, old maps of all different places, like, you can go there, and if he's in his office, you can go, like, ask him questions. Usually he's walking around or whatever, but a lot of times it's like a little open door office thing. And yeah, but he knows, like, all the stuff, like, where everything is. So anyway, but I really like just being in that space. It's really beautiful. Like, it's different from the New York Public Library, the one on 42nd Street, right? Like, that one, it has this beautiful, almost, it's almost like in attempt to recreate, like, the Sistine Chapel level painting, right, on its ceiling, right? But for the LA Library, because it's built in a different architectural style, it instead has lots of murals, but it does have, very beautiful frescoes and everything.
Librarian at the Los Angeles Public Library for over 30 years.
I'm very interested in maps of Los Angeles, and I probably am far more interested than is healthy for most people.
And he took me to the heart of this Spanish pueblo.
It's the most historic ground in the city of Los Angeles, right as where we're standing. This was the place where people gathered. There was.
So right here, Renee, is Plaza Olvera, right? They cut down the tree. There used to be a really big tree here, but I think they cut it down because it probably was starting to, whatever. But yeah, here's a kiosco, right? And yeah, like, if you are like, if you go, and also the old church is still there. And if you go there, like, on an average day, right, to the small Nuestra Señora de Los Ángeles, that's right there, they usually give out pan dulce, right? So if you've never had Mexican sweetbread, right, they give out, like, conchas, right? So it's like this bread that has, like, a design on it to make it look like a seashell, again, Mexican-style donuts, stuff like that, right? And everyone's all about sharing, and that, and you'll see, people, like, sitting down in the shade. It's really nice. Like, I really, that was one thing that I did like about LA, that I, when I would have to be downtown for whatever reason, if I could get on the bus that takes you to Olvera Street, because there's, like, the touristy side, right? The touristy side of everything. But if you're there in La Plaza, right, generally speaking, it's like a whole, you see the older generations, right, sitting down in the shade, platicando, right, chatting. It's nice. It's nice.
The reservoir here, the church is right across the plaza from us.
From this starting point, the streets were to be laid out on a grid at a 45-degree angle. I guess the thinking is that it would allow the maximum amount of sunlight to reach the town, as well as allow the winds to blow through, and help with dust, I guess. The grid wasn't perfect, but it did set in motion the streets that would come later. But you'll notice that the grid ends at Alameda Street. That's because up to here would often flood from the river. Another thing that broke the grid is when they would cut channels from the river to come into the city center. The main one being known as the Zanja Madre. And there's actually a marker on the ground on Olvera Street that shows where this once ran.
Yeah, I'll see. Through this spot flowed the Zanja Madre, Mother Ditch, which channeled the waters of the Los Angeles rivers to the citizens of Los Angeles for 123 years, 1781 to 1904. Sadly, this is not really taught at all in like California history courses. Yeah, La Zanja Madre. And again, this was because, right, what is the first thing under the Spanish rules, right, when it comes to land, right, that they are concerned about? Water access. So that's why. And again, the LA River would shift its course, right, because of the floodplain being pretty much the same on one side and the other side. So at any, during any rainy season, right, it could switch to the other side, which goes out towards Santa Monica, or it could go towards Los Alamitos, Seal Beach, right? So, but by doing this, right, they were able to ensure, right, that even if it changed where the estuary was, right, that at least the river was still able to provide water for the city itself.
And even a part of the actual system is still visible on the train tracks that follow its old route.
Welcome in.
It's always interesting to me that you get these.
In other parts of the world, pan dulce is called melon bread, same design, and breaks apart easily, or it should. Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Little markers in the ground like this or something that no one really looks at, or they'll like walk over it and not really realize that this spot is part of the reason the entire city of Los Angeles is located where it is.
There's a place at the end that's famous for their taquitos.
If they're open, do we need to grab taquitos?
If
Oh, this place that they have. Yes, I've mentioned this place a lot on stream. If you go to LA, their taquitos are really good and they're very cheap. They've been able to keep them at a very decent price, and they're always like, because they're like always selling, right? They're always hot and fresh, So that's why I'm always like, oh yeah, if you're gonna go to Olvera Street, like you have, I mean, like there are other restaurants if you want more like un platillo, so to speak, right? Like if you want like mole or chilaquiles, right? Like that's all there. But I always like los taquitos and just getting like what do I usually get? Well, I usually get like a strawberry Fanta, like the Mexican sodas, right? Or like a Jarritos or something. So
they're open, I might have a taquito.
The plaza marked the center of the pueblo, but the border of the pueblo was marked by what
Welcome in, Raven. It's so nice to see you. Orale.
it's called the 4 square leagues. A league is an outdated measurement that was used by the Spanish. It's about 2.6 miles. So 4 square leagues.
And the league, from what I understand, was also part of the basis of the kilometer. But again, the kilometer isn't exactly 2.6, but it's like, yeah. So again, that's what some historians have tried to make that connection, right? That because it was already used for things like land, that they thought that they could rationalize. I don't know. I haven't seen any good evidence that says it's 100% true. There's some stuff that like people have compared them, but that's about it.
Is about 5.5 miles by 5.5 miles. And this boundary became the original city of Los Angeles.
Right, and so you'll see here, right, it says like Southern Edition, right? All of this stuff was stuff that was added after the fact, right? So 1850, right, after the Americans, stole, right, this part of Mexico, right? They stole 55%, right? So over half, right? So Hollywood and then West Hollywood, right, was not part of LA, hence why, again, Jewish people could live in this area, right? But they still had access to the Sunset Road or Sunset Boulevard, or whatever. And then to the east, right, where you have like Arroyo Seco edition, right, over here was East LA. So that's where you have Alhambra, which in LA you do pronounce the H, I know that. And then you have South Central, which is like in this area in the southern. So again, you know, you do have the square that started then, but then you have all of these additions that keep being added on. And so once you get down to Vernon, right, then we're talking about the southern extension, South Central, etc. So, yeah.
Official city boundary has grown a lot with a bunch of different annexations that has led to one of the...
Yeah, now LA looks like this, right? It started off as a big square, then it kept adding stuff. Now it has this like weird thin panhandle, so it could have San Pedro and over here, and then it extends way up into the valley, and I don't know if you know, but there's a pretty significant chunk of racist white folks, mostly Texans, that are pretty dead set on invading Mexico. It's pretty funny and sad. I mean, it is sad because there's no reason to, right? Like literally, it would do nothing, right? Like it would like literally, like following the US's lead is what started the war on narco trafficking in Mexico in the first place, right? It doesn't stop the fact that America is the largest market of consumption of the drugs that make it so dangerous, right? So, you know, I just don't understand. I don't get it. I will never get it because Mexico's a neutral country. If the United States wanted to do something about, you know, creating, right, safe injection sites, etc., right, to actually help the people, right, that they, right, and depending on however you wanted to go about it, right, then you would see the reduction in the need for the cartels to quote unquote exist, right? But it's not going to happen if you invade the country. That's not going to solve any problems. Like, that's going to make everything worse. And again, like, one thing about the weird racist people is like, it's the same thing what happened in 1846. They don't want Mexican people. Why would they invade Mexico? It's like, oh, to take the land. Well, who lives on that land? Right? So maybe they can just send J.D. Vance to go and haggle over it. Imagine.
Strangest city shapes that I've seen. But this original Foursquare Leagues is still visible in the ground if you look closely. You can see at Silver Lake a hint of this in the property lines.
Yeah, so you can see it right here. So there's this artificial lake, right? But you can see this street, right, on all the houses, right? It's this tangle, but right here, there's this straight line that you can see goes across the lake, and everything is sort of goes around it. It's kind of, you know, this is one of the more difficult ones to see, but you can definitely see it here, right? This division on the western side. The eastern side, it's a little bit over here, a little bit up here, but still, point being that the line is right here, right?
And on the southern end, there's a scar through these blocks that follows this boundary. Now,
yeah, and if you go towards USC, in fact, I think this is USC right here. You can see it. This is more clear, right? Because it sort of cuts into, right, all of these streets, right? But this is the end of the four leagues, right? This is where the Spanish imperial city, right, of Los Angeles, right, is then overlaid with the American, right, settler colonist, right, building of the modern city of LA. So
Every time I look at a satellite view of Los Angeles, I can't help but notice.
yeah. This is USC right here. So USC is more or less where this is at, right? And again, the Spanish had all of their cities, most of their cities, I shouldn't say all of them, but once they had the new law of the law of the Indies, right? Then they made it so that it was at a 45-degree angle. They never wanted anything to be directly north and south. And you can see here the concrete, I don't even know how to say it, embankment of the LA River, right? But yeah, so, and this also explains why, like, LA's downtown is far smaller than downtowns of other cities, right? But again, if you look at the map, you can see that it cutting across because of the Spanish.
This southern boundary. Part of the reason this is so visible is because it used to be the route of a rail car. For just a relatively brief moment, just under 30 years, this land belonged to Mexico after they fought for their independence from Spain. Just as Spain felt that it was their divine right to own and control this land, so did the United States. The term manifest destiny was coined during the Mexican-American War.
That's true, yes. The whole manifest destiny thing was literally all about this. This is what they said manifest destiny was. That, yes, because, and there's a famous quote from a book that goes into this, but it's like the Americans had decided that the Mexican nation did not have a right to exist, right? Because we have to remember, yes, they only took 55% of the country, right? They only stole that much. But initially they wanted all of it. And initially the party, like the people in Congress, wait, why did they avoid north-south borders? Well, one thing is that they always wanted to have the South have a railway that went to the Pacific, right? Which is like where I-10, right? Was one thing. I don't know why they particularly were against north-south borders, but I guess one thing is that they wanted a continental expanse, right? Like they wanted to, because like Canada technically, right, went all the way across. Mexico, just by the fact that it happens to, not be as, the land isn't as wide there, right, has two coasts, right? So America wanted to have a full, seaboard, right, a western seaboard, I guess. But another thing too, right, is that they also knew that there were because during the Mexican period there were some mining operations, but again, this is only 30 years, right? That they had found things like copper, etc., right? But very small. So they also knew that they could also have all of that. And indeed, it was like a week after I believe it was a week after the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, that Sutter's Mill, right, where they found gold. So literally the week after the Mexico was forced to relinquish all of it. But I do want to note one thing. At the beginning of the war, right, the United States actually was not as successful as it likes to be. Like, if most people that when they're taught about the war, they make it seem as though, oh, they just invaded and it was very, very easy. Right? That wasn't true. When they were first fighting in the northern part of Mexico, right? Shown here, but I will transition. When they were fighting here, like in these areas of Mexico, there already are large cities, right? Like Monterrey, right? Matamoros, right? Etc. They were not able to easily win, right? If they did win, it was usually a very close battle. What changed everything was when the United States, again, Mexico had only been independent for about 30 years, and, etc. That is when the United States did a naval invasion. That's what changed the course of the war. Not the army. The Navy. And what did they do? They literally, I kid you not, did what they called the path of Cortés, right? They wanted to enter Mexico City like Hernán Cortés did in 1519. That was their whole thing. Like, oh, we are going to conquer Mexico like how the first conquistador Hernán Cortés did. That's what they wanted to do. So they bombed, they attacked Veracruz, right? Disembarked, and then started marching across, right? What, again, most of the army was in the northern part of the country, right? Fighting against, right, the invasion. Now that they had a second front, right, that was done via naval power, right? That was again heading the same route as Hernán Cortés had, right, to Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City, Tenochtitlan. It was different because there weren't the same amounts of troops available. So again, when they try to make it seem like, oh, it was this heroic, America won every battle, right? It was, again, that wasn't true. It was only once they decided to invade via, once they invoked their naval power against Mexico, which didn't have a fleet at all, like on that scale. It was only then, right, that they were able to, by attacking on two fronts, right, then that's when you start to see the war change, right? That's when you start to see the losses on the Mexican side and huge, movements of American troops on the American side. But that didn't stop them from having lots of guerrilla warfare, essentially, right, taking place. And that was another thing, too, was that they didn't like the fact that they would do guerrilla warfare against them, right? Because the Americans wanted the big battle to end it all, but yeah. So that's when they finally get to Mexico City. They lay siege on it, right? And then there's the famous story of Los Niños Héroes, right? That I forget if he's a cadete or if he had a title. Can't remember exactly what his title in the army was, but his surname was Bandera, right? Which is the irony of that. That he wrapped himself in the Mexican flag, right? La Bandera, right? And that he jumped to his death because he would rather perish, right, wrapped in the flag of the nation than to surrender to the gringos. And it is said that the term gringo actually came about during the Mexican-American War, or during the Mexican, during the American invasion, right? Because they would sing a song that begins with the words "green go," something like "Green Go the Valley," blah blah. And so when they would hear the song, they would say, "Oh, the green goes, right? The gringos are coming, right?" And that's where that apparently came from the song that they would sing. It's not related to whatever people have tried to pretend that it's related to. It apparently is the result of people hearing them singing, the Americans singing, which was, again, it is very common for soldiers to sing when they're marching, especially in the 19th century, and them being called gringos as a result of that. But then they hit a certain ideological problem, right? Initially, they planned on conquering all of Mexico. They wanted all of it. But then they realized two things. Hello, Romixart, welcome in. They realized two things. One, if they conquered Mexico, they now had also conquered and would have to include Mexicans in the United States, right? Because they all lived in the conquered lands. They didn't want that, right? For racialist reasons, right? Second, if they absorbed the entire territory of the nation, right, of Mexico, that would mean that all of those territories, even though technically Mexico had already outlawed slavery, right, but that was no issue for Texas, right? They were able to undo that. They would be subject to becoming slave states, which would give the slave states undue power, right? So unless they also invaded Canada, right, which they weren't going to do, obviously, there was no way for them to keep that equilibrium that they had tried to keep since 1836 or whatever. Or actually, I think it was earlier. But still, point being that having all of this land south of the line, right, the line in Missouri that determined whether you were a slave state or a free state, going west of Missouri, now meant that all of Mexico could have become slave states. So instead, they only took 55% of the country instead of 100, right? Because one, they didn't want to they didn't want their population to become significantly non-white, in this case Mexican, and they also didn't want the slave states to get all of this land for them to have. So the initial lobbying group, right, so to speak, that was the Conquer All of Mexico party, then turned to the just conquer to the Pacific party, right? Yes, I'm in Mexico now. Didn't the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo would be treated as American citizens? Yes. The treaty said that Mexicans that stayed on the now American side of the border, right, would be given citizenship. However, that treaty, it's actually Article 8 of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The United States knew that they were going to have to break it. There is a history of Mexican people being considered, right, depending on the context, right, because you're right. They said that they would give them citizenship. However, Mexicans are not a race, right? We can be of any race. There are white Mexicans, black Mexicans, and everything in between and beyond, right? If they were to give Mexican citizens American citizenship, if they stayed, they would have to deal with the fact that American citizenship, up until that moment, right, up until fairly late in history, until after the Civil War, was based on race alone. Only white people could be citizens. So, people in the United States that had stayed because their lands were in what is now the United States, like in Texas, etc., that were mestizo, especially Afro-mestizo or even Afro-Mexican, right, were always threatened with the fact that, one, they would never be recognized as U.S. citizens, and two, that therefore their claim to their lands was forfeit and therefore could be taken by the white Americans, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind, right? So it did not just grant everybody citizenship, right? There were, in fact, that was a big problem, right? Is that essentially America promised something that it knew it was going to have to break. And there are many other things that they also did, like to recognize that people's property rights, etc. They made it very difficult for people to make sure they could keep their property. So a lot of people ended up having to forcefully, right, like, as it were, because they couldn't have their rights, actually recognized, actually ended up having to go back to Mexico, right, or go into what was now the new borders of Mexico. Those, however, that were considered white did get citizenship. And there is an interesting aspect to keep in mind too, is that whiteness and Mexicanness is something that has been that has ebbed and flowed at different times in history, right? Because of things like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, but also, and I think I have the article here. Let me see if I can find it. This is from the Harvard Latino Law Review, right? Let me see here if I can find it. First, I wonder, and this is by Ian F. Haney Lopez, right? One thing that he says, and I think it's important, is that the court, the Supreme Court itself, has recognized that, quote, race is social in the sense that groups commonly recognized as racially distinct have their genesis in cultural practices of differentiation rather than in genetics, which plays no role in racial fabrication other than contributing to the morphological differences into which the myths of racial identity are inscribed. Okay, so it doesn't mean, however, that, and I will quote here again, although race and ethnicity are equally products of social invention, the process of racial fabrication in the United States have and continue to impose distinct burdens on racialized people. Okay. So, what was the case of Hernandez versus Texas? Right? It was to argue that under the Equal Protection Clause, right, of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, they had been, Mexicans were not protected by it, right? So it says here, the court struggle to conceptualize Mexican-American identity merits close study. To begin with, the court the Supreme Court of the United States. To begin with, the court refused to hold that Mexican Americans constitute a racial group. So again, this was a different time and a different place, right? So instead, it said that I want to get to particularly the part that's most important here. Oh, here we go. The court, again, the Supreme Court of the United States, right? The court's conception of race as some, oh no, pardon me. Proceeding from this understanding of race, the court could not help but be perplexed by Mexican American identity. Though subject to violent and extensive discrimination in some parts of the country, and I am quoting from this article, which if you would like me to cite it, I will. You can ask me in the Discord. Make sure to join the Discord. Though subject to violent and extensive discrimination in some parts of the country, Mexican Americans were virtually unknown and unracialized in other parts of the nation. Again, this is what the Supreme Court is saying. Though the objects of extreme social prejudice, Mexican Americans were rarely the object of de jure legal discrimination. Though often darker in skin than most whites, Mexican Americans often insisted, as did the lawyers for Hernandez in their argument before the Supreme Court, that Mexican Americans were members of the white race. And again, yes, I did move to Mexico. I'm currently in Mexico City now. Here, one of those neighborhoods house the Mexican general and troops. Most of the houses are protected in Texas. Yeah. Right. So, what I find very interesting is, again, the majority opinion of the Supreme Court of the United States states, and again I'm quoting, quote, albeit unwittingly, the Hernandez opinion offers a sophisticated insight into racial formation. Whether a racial group exists, the majority opinion of the Supreme Court correctly tells us, is a local question that can be answered only in terms of community attitudes. To translate this insight into broader language, race is social, not biological. It is a matter of what people believe, rather than of natural decree. Thus, it is possible for Mexican Americans to exist as a race in Jackson County, Texas, but simultaneously not to constitute a race in Washington, D.C. So, again, I'm not saying I agree with all of the arguments that Haney Lopez, right, goes with, but again, this was a decision by the Supreme Court, right? The Supreme Court of the United States knew even then, right? This was in the 70s, if I remember correctly. Pardon me, 1954. I always get the year wrong. 1954. The court already said that race is a social construct. So all these people saying, oh, that it's woke, it's critical race theory, it's DEI, what? The Supreme Court said it. Hernandez versus Texas. They said it themselves. They said it themselves. Before wokeness was invented, right? Quote unquote. Right? Because, of course, it was the 50s, the golden age of non-wokeness, right? And yes, Mexico City is so beautiful. Yeah, it's Liberation Day. I saw the video of the tariffs, and it just sounds to me like... well, in the Discord, if people are curious about looking, right, researching about possible places to move to, out of the country, you can look there.
The U.S. took a large portion of what was Mexico, including all of California. During this war, John C. Fremont, who we talked about a little bit in the Las Vegas video, stayed at a home on Olvera Street that is still standing.
He used this as his headquarters. Basically, Los Angeles was going to be part of the United States, and the Californios weren't too happy about it, so he was sent to persuade them that the U.S. was now in charge.
And the Californios, right, typically meant land, again, not always, but typically meant people that were considered white, or at least, you know, acceptable, right, in that time period. Where they would stress their Spanish ancestry, for example, or their European ancestry. Yeah.
So in 1850, California became a U.S. state, and that's about the same time this map was made.
A map drawn by two moonlighting army officers whose names were Ord and Hutton. They completed very quickly the first true map of Los Angeles, and that map had a profound impact on how the people of Los Angeles would occupy the place in which they lived.
You can see a little bit of the fort that was built for the Mexican-American War on this map, and there's a marker in the street today that if you're in downtown LA, you can go see. You can see that the Spanish didn't develop the grid very far, but on this map, blocks were laid out that extended that grid. The reason this map was precise was the main reason that most maps got precise: money.
And so the very first map of Los Angeles reflects something that's been true about Los Angeles ever since. We've been selling empty space in order to make a bigger city.
In the same years Los Angeles was being laid out by the Spanish, Thomas Jefferson was on the opposite side of the continent, looking west with a plan for the new country. If land could be sold on precise coordinates, it could quickly be sold to fund the government and avoid land disputes. So even though it would be 60 years and...
So again, right, on the East Coast, right, Thomas Jefferson already had this plan of commodifying land, right, and selling it as quickly as possible, right? So that's why you have this, right, one system that is based on, right, the 4 leagues, right, and these different layers of what has to be where, right, that, you know, is a sort of semi-feudal relation, right, in terms of, like, you know, the relationship to the means of production, quote unquote, right? And then the very capitalists, like, oh, we're literally going to lay out, right, these blocks throughout the entire continent, right, so that way we can sell land and, you know, etc. And it's still that way now, right? But everywhere where the Spanish did build a city that was, you know, substantial, that wasn't completely demolished by, you know, the United States, you see these two clash, right? Same thing with, you don't see it as much with French cities because they also had like a grid pattern. It's mostly with Spanish cities Spanish cities.
Until California was part of the U.S., new lines were being drawn that would clash with the existing 4 square leagues.
Came under the, if you will allow me, the Jeffersonian imperial vision. And so a new grid of streets gradually evolved away from the Spanish one to reflect the standard American north, south, east, west grid. So at the heart of Los Angeles is a crooked city. And when people travel from the American grid to the Spanish grid, they move from one imperial imagination to another imperial imagination.
So the grid had been drawn, but the land was largely empty. Around the year when the Ord map had been created, the city was only about 1,500 people. And a lot had to happen to create modern Los Angeles.
Los Angeles was not on the national rail grid until 1876. It had no natural resources beyond sunshine. There were no mines. Its soil was fertile, but lacking in water.
Like I said, this was not an ideal place for a city. But that wasn't going to stop landowners from trying to make it profitable. The late 19th century in Los Angeles was the era of the boosters, people trying to promote their land for sale.
Los Angeles sold...
Right, and this also is a big thing in Texas, right, where they try to demographically change, right, and in fact, there's a map, I put it on Discord a while ago, maybe I'll upload it again, where if you look at where most of the largest ranches in Texas are, they're mostly along the Rio Grande, for a reason, because the boosters tried to get as many Anglo-Americans, right, to move to the Rio Grande River Valley, right? So then that way, and this is why, again, I mentioned that certain people that were not considered fully white or to be worthy of having citizenship, right, quote unquote, right, were often kicked off of their land, were dispossessed, etc., sometimes very violently. And you had boosters, again, trying to sell the vision of Texas, South Texas in particular, as this, cornucopia where you could just drop seeds and trees grow in a month, right? Same thing in California. Again, the whole point was to overtake the California population, right? The population of mostly what, if we could even, of white, criollo, some mestizo landowners, right, that historically had the ranches and, in fact, some of them, you can still see remnants of what used to be those ranches in the names of places, right? Rancho Cucamonga, right? Blah, 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 right? Sometimes they refer to a former ranch. And if you want to read a book that takes place in this time, where like the Anglo-Americans, right, are moving in and they're sort of clashing with the Californians, there is the book Ramona, which sort of takes place during this time period. Again, it's a novel, but I've always found it very interesting because it does try to portray the Californios. So, again, it was to sell the land to people. Same thing in South Texas, right? It wasn't just profit. It also was to change the demographics of these regions, right? And another thing I want to highlight that you kind of can't really see, maybe if I quickly transition. Note the ruins right here, right? Why would there be ruins in a place that is still populated, right? That still has, right, people that live there, right? It's part of this fantasy that, they're used, like this is exactly what is still the case in California and in other parts, right? You see this, right? They love to name neighborhoods and, they love to build in the Spanish colonial style, right? They like, Mexican, knickknacks and art and stuff like that, right? But they don't like the people, right? It's this like, oh, look, we are, we sort of found this place in ruins, right? And the people were gone, right? It's part of that colonial, right, way of thinking about, their relationship to the land, right? It's a very 19th century thing, but it still exists in the 21st century, right? Where, we're going to name all of these neighborhoods all these Spanish names, right? But they're also super racist and they hate the people that are, they would have previously lived there, right? So, see what YouTube is saying. Yeah, Liberation Day. I still don't get what that's even supposed to mean.
Pulled itself into existence. It made a lifestyle brand that was marketed all over the country and ultimately all over the world. Los Angeles capitalized on what scholars called fantasy Spanish past and opened Olvera Street as a kind of fantasy.
Yes, this was a big thing also in New Mexico, where you had actually a group of what they call themselves the Hispanos, right? They are a group of people, right, that live in northern New Mexico that distinguish themselves from southern New Mexico, right? Where they said, the people in southern New Mexico, they're Mexicans, right? They are mixed with indigenous blood. But we are the Spanish descendants of conquistadors, right? So we are actually Spanish, not Mexican. And if you look at maps, right, like where it shows like different areas of where different ethnic groups, nationalities live, oftentimes you'll see New Mexico, right, sort of sticking out where everything else sort of shows like Mexican or whatever, right? And that's because, again, they try to claim whiteness, right? And this thing here, right, this mythical Spanish past is exactly the way how, in effect, the Anglo-Americans, well, one, remember, New Mexico used to include Arizona, right? Arizona got to become a state first. They literally cut it off from New Mexico. Why? Because central Arizona became a majority Anglo-American, right? So this is, I don't remember the cities. I know Flagstaff is one of them, but like all of the other cities in the center, right? And the parts that were Mexican majority, right, were the southern parts. So because they were able to essentially become the dominant group in that area, they allowed Arizona to become a state first. Right? New Mexico, even though it technically, because the Hispanos were considered white, they were not allowed to become a state right away. And that's because they didn't see them as equals, right? They saw them as something in between, right? Mexicans and white people, right? As a sort of second tier, right? Something in between the two, right? And so what they did in New Mexico, and what they also kind of did in LA for some of the people, right? And you see here, right, Pio Pico, right? Like, you will see a lot of names of some of the, like the Pico family is a big one, right? Because they were large landowners. Is that again, they were compared, right? Like they were also seen as something from the past, right? Like the indigenous people, right? So they say, oh, if you go to New Mexico, you can see the, and again, at this time in the 19th century, right, and the lead up to when the 20th century, when New Mexico becomes a state, there was still this belief that the indigenous people were going to go extinct, right? Like, I'm not even joking. Like, it was simply that type of language, right? That they will, blah, 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 right? Same thing with Jewish people in Europe, right? So anyway, so they said, oh, you can see the indigenous people, right? Which they thought of as the lowest rung, right? And you can see the Spanish people, right? And you can see their medieval, this was the point, medieval, right? Ways of being, right? Where they're all about honor and they're all about blah, 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 all that stuff, right? And also they're Catholic, right? That's another thing, right? And then you can see the future, right? The Anglo-Americans, right? So, once it became majority Anglo-American, once the Hispanos had essentially lost most of the power in the state, in the territorial legislature, etc., only then were they allowed to become a state. Because technically they were white, but they were not white, so to speak, right? So, I know, it's crazy, right?
Gateway to Spanish-Mexican Los Angeles.
And it worked. One by one, the hurdles of living in this area were resolved, at least temporarily. When I asked DJ Waldy about this, he said the pivotal year was 1913.
That year, the Owens Valley Aqueduct reached the San Fernando Valley. The Pacific Electric system was reaching its maximum extent. In 1913, you have the genuine beginning of Hollywood. The expectation that the Panama Canal will open soon. City resources are being poured into the development of the Port of Los Angeles, which would eventually become one of the most important shipping ports in the world.
All of this ignited the sprawl of the city, making this one of the largest urban sprawls in the U.S.
And all that still persists in the landscape, so that when entirely new immigrant populations arrive in Los Angeles with their entrepreneurial energy, They move into the small houses on small lots on gridded streets that look just like mine in Lakewood. The built landscape of Los Angeles persists in ways that should be better understood by all of us who live here.
And in the center of it, the ideals of these two empires is still visible. I know this video might be a little different since I'm just setting up the framework of the city, but I feel like there's so many more interesting stories in LA that need their own dedicated videos. So if you have any ideas for those or suggestions, please put it in the comments below.
So, anyway, I don't know. To me, I think that that's interesting because, again, like, it shows how, you know, history is still present, right? History is not just this thing that is past, so to speak, right? Instead, it is something that, you know, we can still feel, right, in our everyday lives. So, I think it would probably be okie dokie. History is a living, changing entity. Yeah, very much so. I mean, again, that's the reason why, like, even in the courses I want to teach, right, it's to sort of show that it's still a constant process. It doesn't just end just because, oh, the war ended, or because this, you know. Okay, everyone. Thank you. Okay, Omega Star. See you later. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this stream, the first stream over here in La Ciudad de Mexico. I hope that you know, this will be the first of many streams to come. Yeah, hopefully soon I will have a schedule. Yeah, make sure to join the Discord. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube. But yeah, we're gonna raid out, and make sure to say hello to Cinemarxism. Yeah, I will see you all later. And for those of you on YouTube, I will also see you all later. Make sure to join the Discord, and again, I'm always here if you need anything. Bye.